what's up YouTube, I hope all of you are having a great day so far. In today's upload we are going to be going over the best settings in Season 3 of Cold War. And just before we go into these settings, if you find this video helpful at all, I'd really appreciate if you could hit that like button, helps to bump it up a little bit. And if you are new to the channel and you want to get better at Call of Duty, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Without further ado, let's get right into these settings. So because I play on PC, some of these settings are going to be a little bit different. I don't use keyboard and mouse, so I'm not going to give you like my keybinds. I'm a controller player, but I do play on PC. And so for example, if you're on console, you're not going to have the graphics section. If you're on PC, you will, but all the other sections will be the same. And so if you're on console, just pretty much fast forward past the graphics settings. But so anyways, for the display mode, if you want the best graphics possible, I recommend doing full screen. The reason I have mine on windowed full screen is because I always use my second monitor because I'm always recording or I'm going on Twitter and stuff. And so I don't want to have to like tab out, and so that's why I have windowed full screen. For the gameplay VSync, you want this disabled. For the menu VSync, you want this disabled. Just so you guys know, I'm not too familiar with all these, and so if you guys ask me questions, I can't really answer them because I got all these from like a good friend of mine, and so I'm not too familiar of what these are. I just know that these are the best ones to do, if that makes sense. For the NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency, you want this on enabled boosted. For the render resolution, 100. For the display resolution, I have mine on 1920 by 1080. For the aspect ratio, I have mine on automatic. The colorblind modes, I haven't really messed with these at all. This is all kind of personal preference. This is the place where you can change like the color of your name tag, of the enemy's name tags, and just the kill feed. You can kind of customize it to your own preference. For the field of view, I like 110. I know a lot of people like to do like 120, but the reason I don't do 120 is because if you're on controller, it's a little bit harder to aim. And so if you're on controller, I feel like 100 to 110 is perfect. If you're on keyboard and mouse, I would do 120. For the ADS field of view, I have mine on affected. For the vehicle aiming field of view, affected. The brightness doesn't matter, as that is monitor specific. For the frame rate limit, I have mine on custom. I feel like when I cap it at like 150, so I have a 144 Hz monitor, and so I only can see up to 144 frames. But if I cap this at 144 frames, I feel like I'm always getting like 100 or 120 frames. But if I have it on unlimited, I feel like I always go past 140, and so that's why I just have mine on unlimited. For the texture quality, this kind of depends on your PC build. Like for me, I have a pretty decent PC, and so I can run 144 frames on the high setting. And so if I couldn't run 140, I'd probably do like medium. But if you have a pretty good PC, I would keep this on high. And then for the model quality, I would keep this on high because it doesn't really affect your VRAM too much. For the HD game textures models, I have this installed. For the 4K interface textures, this is disabled. Special effects, medium. Screen space reflection, this is on disabled. Object view distance, this is going to be high. You want to make sure this is on high just so you can see your enemies at farther distances. For the water tessellation, I have this on disabled. For the shadows and lightning, low. And I have this one on low. I'm not going to really read all these out because you guys probably don't really care. You can just look at it and then kind of copy and paste everything to your settings. For the shadows, all disabled, enabled. For the ray tracing, you want to make sure this is on disabled. You'll get way more frames. For the NVIDIA DLSS, this is pretty much just there so you can get more frames. Makes the picture quality a little bit worse, like makes it a little bit blurry, but you do get more frames. And so if you're looking for more frames, I would do this one. For me, I already can get 140, 150 frames in game, and so I have mine on disabled just so I have a good image quality with high frames. Say you do want to run this, then I would do balance, but it is kind of all up to you. You can kind of read through all these and pick whichever one you want, but for most people, I would recommend to do balance or just keep it off. For the ambient occlusion quality, I have mine on disabled. For the motion blur, you want to make sure this is on disabled. This is a must. For the subsurface scattering, you want this on disabled. For the order independent transparency, I have mine on disabled. In the advanced section, so I have mine on default 80%. Display gamma, computer sRGB. For the display adapter, this one doesn't matter. And then yeah, so that's going to wrap it up for the graphics setting. Let's get over to the audio. So for the master volume, I have mine on 100. For the music volume, because I am a sweat, I don't really care about hearing the music. I just want to hear like enemies' footsteps and gunfire, and so that's why I have mine on 20, and I have the sound effects at 100 so I can maximize the sound of the enemy's footsteps. For the dialogue volume, I have mine on 81. For the cinematics, I have mine on 20. I actually might increase this because there's only cinematics like before you load into the game if there's like a new update, so it doesn't really matter. For the audio presets, if you want to hear the footsteps as loud as possible, then I would do super bass boost. For the hit marker sound effects, enabled. And this stuff doesn't matter. Voice, yeah, so all this stuff in here I don't think matters at all. This is all like computer specific. And then yeah, so that's gonna wrap it up for the audio settings. Let's go over to the interface. For the subtitles, a lot of people actually have this enabled because sometimes the operator will say something that's actually important, like a certain score should coming in, but say you're in the middle of a gunfight, you didn't really hear your operator say that, and so these subtitles are going to allow you to read at the bottom of your screen. But since I do record, I think it looks a little bit cleaner to not have them, and so because I record, I do not have them on. For the HUD balance, you want to make sure this is as tight as possible. This is just going to kind of like center everything so you don't really have to look so far to the edge of your screen. For the HUD elements, this one doesn't really matter. This is all personal preference, but you know, I have mine on shown. This stuff really does not matter at all. This is all personal preference. For the controller section, this is probably the main section that you guys came to the video for. So So for the sensitivity, this is all personal preference. By just copying my sensitivity, it's not going to make you a better player, because this is all like controller specific, player specific. This is all up to you guys. If I were to recommend a sensitivity, I would say 1010, because I feel like it's a perfect balance between being very accurate and being able to turn on people. For the ADS stick sensitivity low zoom, this is like when you're in the middle of a gunfight, and so I like to have this on 0.95, just so it's a little bit slower than my actual sensitivity, just so when I'm in the middle of the gunfight I can be a little bit more accurate. It's a lot easier to trace my enemies. For the ADS stick sensitivity high zoom, I like to do 1.1. I don't know why, but I feel like I'm a lot more accurate with my sniper shots when I have it at 1.1. For the button layout, because I do have an Xbox Elite controller, as you guys can see on screen, I do have paddles on the back, and so all of these buttons are actually on the back of the controller, and so that's why I do default. Say I didn't have a Xbox Elite controller, you know, I'd still probably have default, because previously I used to play claw, and so I used to use this finger to be able to hit these buttons, so I don't have to take the time to move my thumb to these buttons. So if I'm in the middle of a gunfight, I want to jump, I don't want to have to like take off my thumb off the stick and go click the jump button. I'd rather just have this finger to click the jump button so I can still aim while jumping, and so that's why it's really nice to play claw or to have like a controller with paddles. But say you don't play claw and you don't have a controller with paddles, I recommend doing tactical, just so it's a lot easier to drop shot. Drop shot is not too popular in this game, and so for previous Call of Duties, for sure do tactical, but for this Call of Duty, I actually recommend to do stick and move, just so you can use the stick right here to jump, and so mid gunfight you can jump around, make it a lot harder for the enemy to hit you. Flip the triggers with the bumpers, I recommend to do this, just so you don't have to take the time to actually pull down the trigger to shoot your weapon. If you do the bumper, you'll actually be able to shoot your weapon a little bit faster. If you're using a pistol, it's a lot easier to spam this button rather than pulling the trigger each time. For me, I have trigger stops, and so I actually only have to pull it down about halfway for it to register, but if you just have a regular controller, I recommend having this to be flipped. For the aim response curve type, if you're a very experienced Call of Duty player, if you have pretty good accuracy, I would do dynamic. You're going to be able to flick on people very easily. Say you're not the best Call of Duty player, then I would just do standard or linear. For the controller vibration, I recommend you guys to have this on disabled. I used to have it on enabled for years, but recently, about a year ago, I switched it over to disabled, and I'm actually a way better player, just because it makes sense. If you're in the middle of a gunfight and your controller is shaking, you're bound to miss some shots, but if your controller doesn't shake at all, you're not going to really miss any shots. And so if you're like a sweat like me, I would have this on disabled. For the target aim assist, you want to make sure this is on enabled. This is what's going to give you aim assist. For the target aim assist mode, I have mine on standard. These ones are really bugged and they don't really help you too much. Focusing is really OP. Sometimes at close range you can kind of like glue onto people, but at long range it doesn't work that well, and they're all kind of buggy, and so I recommend just to do standard. For the ADS aim assist, so this is only going to help you in campaign and zombies. This is pretty much where it like locks onto the enemies, and so for zombies I like to have mine on disabled, because then I can use zombies as like an aim trainer. If I had it to where it would snap onto people, it really messes up your aim, and so if you are a zombies player and you have this on enabled and then you go over to multiplayer, you'll notice it's really hard to hit the enemies. But if you get used to playing zombies on disabled, then you go over to multiplayer, it'll be a lot easier to kill your enemies. For the grounded mantle behavior, you want to make sure this is on second press. This is pretty much going to make it so if you go next to an object, usually if you don't have this on second press and you go to jump, you'll mantle onto that. But there's times where you're on like a head glitch, like you're behind cover on it, then you want to jump to make it so it's a little bit harder for the enemy to hit you. Or if you're in a crouch position, then you want to stand up. If you don't have this on second press, you're actually going to mantle, but if you have it on second press, it's going to make it so you don't mantle, and so pretty much this is going to make it so you don't accidentally mantle on objects. And so with this, you just need to hit the jump button twice if you want to mantle on something. For the aim down sight behavior, I have mine on hold. For the steady aim behavior, I have mine on hold. Armor behavior, apply all. Attack vehicle control mode, aim base, this stuff doesn't really matter at all. Stick layout, I have mine on default. You can switch it around to something if you want, but I think most people do default. For the ADS stick swap, I have mine on disabled. For the thresholds, this is all controller specific. This is pretty much the dead zone, and so the dead zone is going to prevent you from having stick drift. And so pretty much if you go into a game, then you see like a little crosshair just drifting across the screen by itself, that means you have some stick drift, and then you pretty much just need to locate if it's your left stick or your right stick. So the way to find that out is pretty much if your character randomly starts to move forward or backwards, that means it's going to be your left stick. If your controller's aim randomly starts to go to the left or right or up and down, then it's going to be the right stick, and so you need to locate which one has it, and then you can adjust it to these values. And so the more you increase these numbers, the less sensitive your controller will be. And so if you got some stick drift, I would locate whichever stick it is, and then I would move this value up by 1 until you have no stick drift. You want to make sure this is on the lowest number possible. And so pretty much if you go into a game, you see your crosshair moving, you want to increase this right stick minimum threshold by 1 until you don't see that drift anymore. For the auto sprint, I have mine on enabled. I recommend actually having this on disabled unless you do lots of slide cancels. And so if you're like a sweater like me and you like to do slide cancels, then I would keep this on enabled. For the sprint cancels reload, make sure this is on disabled. For the parachute auto deploy, make sure this is on disabled. Equipment behavior, hold, interact, fact, I have mine on tap to reload. This is all kind of personal preference. I would read through these and pick whichever one works best for you because it is all personal preference. And so with all that said, I think that's going to wrap it up for the best settings. Sorry if this was a little bit of a boring video, but you know, it's good to get one of these out every season. And so I hope I helped you guys out. If I did, make sure you leave a like on the video. But so anyways, hope all of you have a great rest of your day, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video.